Good morning. Happy Monday, everyone. I'm about to run out the door and do my normal construction and development duties. But before I did, I figured I'd better hop on here and talk about a couple of things that I'm already thinking about and things that you should be thinking about too. Asset prices are continuing to climb. It's going to be very exciting. We're going to continue to bring people onto Pulse Chain and onto CVRE very, very quickly. And as things speed up and as that price continues to climb, it's going to create a lot of noise. And that's going to be exciting. It's going to create a lot of emotion and a lot of hype. But there's a lot of technical stuff that's happening in the background, a lot of real world stuff that makes this a legitimate asset that we should be excited about. And you already know some of the decentralized things that we're working on in the real world. We are trying to tie the asset to outside assets in the real world. But I want to tell you some of the real world ammunition that should get you pumped for what's to come. Back in 2021, when we went through that bull market, the size of Pulse Chain and the Hex ecosystem was about 200,000 people, 200,000 wallets or so were circulating around, and about $2 billion was raised for the Pulse Chain and PulseX sacrifices, not including the assets that were already in Hex and those valuations. Since then, I haven't looked at the numbers lately, but I think those numbers have exploded to about somewhere between 500,000 and 600,000 wallets. Now, where are those people? They're not on X. They're not loud yet. We don't hear their voices. We don't hear them talking. They're not yelling and screaming yet. And if you're wondering why, it's because the move that we've seen over the last 2 days is only 20 or 30%. The market's just barely waking up. People aren't even sure if it's real yet. Unless you've been following the market for the last 2 years and you're really in tune with what's going on in the macro economy, you may not even have looked at your portfolio in the last 3 days. So the majority of the world is getting up every Monday morning and going to work at this time. And maybe they pulled up their crypto portfolio, which, remember, the average size crypto portfolio worldwide is still less than $3,000. So they pulled up their crypto app and they saw they were up a whopping, let's see, $500 or less if they were in altcoins. If they were in BTC or ETH, that number is even lower because the large assets move up by a lower percentage. So think about it in terms of the impact that it's having as far as noise on a global scale. That noise is just barely starting globally. BTC is just barely getting loud in the news over the last, 2 to 4 weeks. That wave is just barely starting to rise in people's minds. And as it does rise, and as those 500,000 voices do start to activate, the amount of publicity and marketing and yelling and screaming that's going to come onto the chain is going to increase. And you'll see that start to reflect in the prices. As a result of that 20 to 30% increase in the price of Hex and Pulse Chain, we saw a spillover effect onto CVRE of a significant percentage. Our buying activity in terms of dollars yesterday was not that significant in terms of volume. I think it was like $4,000, $4,000, $5,000. And yet our market cap increased by $100,000, $150,000. Our value as an asset is going to exponentially increase because of the way our liquidity pool is tied to Pulse Chain as an asset. And our liquidity pool is actually very similar to another asset on Pulse Chain called TFC. A great group of people. I've talked to them. I talked to Tim Benjamin, who is one of their founding members. He was on the conference. He was on a panel with me. Great guy. Seems like a really good person. Guess how much they've gone up so far prior to the wave hitting? And this is just since January, February of this year. They've gone up 300x so far. And they have a much larger audience. They've been around longer than we have in terms of gathering an audience that listens to what they're talking about on X. But yeah, 300x already. Same liquidity pool setup. So the amount of leverage that they're creating under that asset is going to be ginormous, and they should be congratulated for creating that size of leverage. We're going to experience something very similar. The reason why we should be excited is because our dollars, as they are funneled here, are creating a much higher impact because we're much smaller, which means that we're lighter and we can move much faster in an upward direction with fewer dollars. Something else to think about is that most people have never managed a six-figure portfolio. Most people have never managed a six-figure crypto portfolio. So this is if this is your first cycle and you are in a five-figure crypto position right now, you are probably about to see a 10 to a 30x at minimum within a very short period of time. If that occurs, that is going to feel unreal, and it is going to mess with your emotions. The amount of euphoria that people experience when they see an asset grow that fast is hard to understand until you feel it. So you need to prepare now for how you're going to manage that emotion, because people don't understand how hard it is to buy during the bear market, and people don't understand how hard it is not to sell during the bull market. I already know based on liquidity pools and the amount of leverage that we're creating, that our asset can do multiple hundreds of X's, because we are this little mole that is growing on a guppy that is feasting on the gills of a shark that is swimming through a multi-billion-dollar industry of crypto. It is technically possible, and it has a high probability of occurring based on the way our liquidity pools are set up. What determines whether or not that happens is whether or not our top 10 to 20 wallets can control their emotions and not sell for the next 6 to 9 months. As we work together to queue ourselves as a community and hold together and work to keep our liquidity together. If you can imagine what it looks like to get a 10x or a 20x and keep your emotions in check, try to imagine what it would look like to get 100x in your portfolio and not click the sell button. How about a 200x or a 300x and not click the sell button? Can you write that number down? And can you tell yourself that you are okay to not click the sell button for a period of time while we work to create a plan that safely removes that liquidity and protects it out in the real world, which is what we're working on right now? The narrative that we have right now of helping people get in at the bottom, let's be in a hurry, let's make sure that we bring our friends along, that's going to have to evolve in 6 to 9 months, because it would be irresponsible for us to be yelling and screaming and putting thousands of people in at the top. But I can already promise you that emotions are going to be high. People are going to be excited, and people are going to pile in whether we want them to or not. So you are going to hear my voice change in 6 to 9 months from now. And I'm going to have to come up with technical and experiential ways to encourage people to be responsible with their money and find ways to lock it up so that they keep their liquidity, find ways to encourage them to preserve their liquidity in some way or another, either by dollar cost averaging out or moving to safer assets. You're going to hear that conversation evolve over the course of the bull run. And the reason I'm telling you now is because now is the time for you to also be thinking about how much can you get into position now? How are your emotions going to change based on 50x from now or 100x from now? Can you prevent yourself from clicking the sell button at 100x or 150x? What does that look like for you? If you did dollar cost average out, what would the percentage be that you would dollar cost average out? Can you do single-sided liquidity providing like Amish presented this morning? Do you know what that is? Do you know how to technically do it yet? Can you get some education on it? There's a whole bunch to learn between now and then that will prevent you from making a mistake. One more point on this subject. Please, please, please do not show your portfolio to friends, to your wives or husbands that do not have the same education or have not spent the same amount of time learning about this asset, crypto, or anything related to finance. If they haven't spent the same amount of time here and they haven't got the same education, do not share information or ask for opinions from these people. Why? Because what are they basing their decisions on? Emotion. It's going to be all emotion and intuition. We need to make data-driven decisions, especially as we get excited, especially as the dollars grow. It is so hard when somebody is sitting next to you and you pull up a 6 or a 7-figure portfolio and they don't have the education to tell you what you should do, but they know that you're excited and they know that that money can change your financial environment. You need to be very careful about how you share information. Information security, especially as how the bull market progresses, is critical. It's especially critical outside your family. It is equally critical inside your family and with relatives that do not spend the same amount of time on education and on this information. It's just something to keep in mind. I'm not saying keep secrets. I'm saying if people are not going to spend the same amount of time on education, you need to be careful about how you manage information. Final thing. For the top 15 to 25 wallets, I'm working on ways to provide asset protection, not only for all of you, but for the entire group of holders. One of the things that we're going to look into is, just to give you some hints on the future, we're going to provide incentives for people to stake towards the end of the cycle that will reward them in token counts, that will give them yield in tokens, that will allow us to convert liquidity into USDC at the top of the market. What this will do is it will allow us to safely move our speculative assets into USDC and allow us to move out of the cycle safely while rewarding holders who may still want to ride out the cycle, ride out the bull, and reward them for potentially holding through the bear market if a bear market occurs. At the same time, we will also be able to protect them partially from downside while still preserving people's individual liberty and freedom of choice. We can build that front end, that use, in about 2 weeks. So we don't need to be in a hurry to build it, but you need to know that in the background, I'm going to work on that ability as a potential option for people to use if they choose to, as a means of converting the speculative asset CVRE into USDC at the top and allowing people to preserve their capital while at the same time being rewarded for doing so. I think that's all that I've got for today. If you ever have any questions on any of these subjects or you want to hear more about what I'm doing on the outside, please let me know. I'm speaking to another group of attorneys today, and I'll report back on those meetings. And I'm also speaking to another group to onboard today. So if you have friends, relatives, people you like who want to get in front of another capital pool, today would be a good time to do it. Thanks for hopping on. Thanks for supporting CVRE. This is just the beginning. It's an exciting time to be alive. I feel like I'm on the edge of an entire industry that's being birthed. I can't think of a more exciting place to be. Thanks for building with us. We'll talk to you later.